Have you ever had a watch that you wished for a long time? Maybe you saved for it, then you ended up buying it, and months, maybe a year later, you find yourself not wearing it. You find it not getting the wrist time you thought it would, and you're thinking of selling it. This is a pretty common situation for watch collectors. And we're going to talk about the reasons that it ends up happening and how, if you're cognizant of them, you can end up avoiding them over time. The first one, and I think a pretty common one, is something I call borrowed taste. And essentially, that is where you are outsourcing your taste and your choosing of watches to the world around you. And if you're watching this video, that means you're on YouTube, and you probably watch a lot of watch YouTubers, and you are subtly, whether you realize it or not, influenced by what they push and what they recommend. And a big problem with that is they tend to be very groupthinky. So you have watch YouTubers that are pushing watches and they can explain why this is a good watch, but they actually don't necessarily know why they're recommending it to you. This is very common in the world where you have GPTs that are constantly reinforcing popular content and then pushing that popular content back to you in the form of a recommendation. Another big one is socials, things like Reddit, things like Instagram. These are places where you're seeing the same watches over and over and over again, and they take up a bigger percentage of your brain share, and you start to think they're the only watches. And they're actually not representative of what are the most popular watches, but even necessarily what are the best watches. Let's take a look at this. This is a breakdown of Reddit and the watch exchange subreddit where people go and buy and sell watches and the most popular brands on there. And what I've done here is I've actually compared it to the top 50 watch brands, but I've sorted those watch brands in terms of the number of units that they actually sell. 6.37% of all posts on Watch Exchange were Tudors. And so it feels like a very popular watch if you're visiting Reddit. Meanwhile, the actual percentage of watches sold of the top 50 watch brands by Tudor was only about 1.23%. So the Reddit representation is over 5 times what the actual purchasing representation is. Surprisingly, Longines went the other direction, and while only being 1.7% of all posts on Reddit, it's actually 5.3% of all Swiss watches sold. So you see 1/3 as many Longines posts on Reddit as you probably should if they were representative of the entire watch world. So why does this matter? There are hundreds of watch brands and you're only seeing a very small subset of them extremely commonly. And also you have people who you trust and people who you respect and people who you are just straight up hearing telling you that these watches are exciting. And they might not be to you. You might not want these watches at all. But again, they will start to feel like the common watch that you should just pick up because you see it everywhere. Another really common one I see all the time is people buying for specs instead of design. And I think that when you're buying a car for what's under the hood, there's something that you're going to constantly feel that, right? Every time you push on the gas. But with a watch, you're not going to feel accuracy every day. You're not going to feel power reserve every day. You're not going to feel all of these things that you believe strongly really matter to you when you're picking a watch and you're looking at the specs and you're comparing the specs per dollar. But at the end of the day, the design is what you're going to look at nonstop and for the most part, as well as the actual brand itself and your feelings around it and kind of your opinions around it. And the thing is that a 80-hour power reserve will not help you overcome a watch that you're actually not excited about, that you're not thrilled about. So I think it's important to take specs into account. They're a piece of the equation for sure, but to me, they should not be the make or break of why you bought one watch over the other. The third one, and one I've done a lot, is blind buying a watch, right? You buy a watch based off how it looks online, based off how it looks on someone else's wrist, based off how it looks in pictures, and you haven't tried it on. And once you actually put it on, it does not feel or look the way you thought it would. For me, I have a wrist that's about 6.8 inches. So if I buy a big chunky Bell & Ross, which I actually did once, it's going to look like a Lego brick on my wrist, but I'm not going to realize that until I start wearing it and start feeling kind of silly wearing it. So blind buying watch is okay, but you should really understand your lug to lugs and your case diameter before you are actually willing to blind buy a watch. Another is buying due to like a fleeting feeling or experience. And this can just be that some days your tastes are a little bit different than other days. You wake up in a different mood or feel a little bit different. And it could be that maybe you were just a little bit drunk. You got home from the bar on the Saturday night and you bought that weird vintage Zenith and you woke up and you're wondering what the heck you bought. And you go, maybe I like it. I'm pretty sure I like it. And then you find a month later that it doesn't fit in your collection at all. So the advice I've received on this, and I really like it, is wait as long as you can to buy a watch. Wait months if possible. Wait years if possible. If you live near an AD or you go to a mall that has that AD very often, even if you're not buying from that AD, go in multiple times and try on the same watch in different outfits, in different moods, in different company, and see how you feel about it. Another very common one is buying for the use case you don't actually have. Very common expression of this is buying dress watches, because there are a lot of cool, iconic dress watches. As you're just getting into watches in the $1,000 to $5,000 range, there's a ton of stuff with a lot of value. And what people realize is that maybe the average American wears a suit 1 to 3 times a year, unless they're in some sort of specific job that requires it, which is exceedingly rare these days. So you'll find that you have 2 or 3 dress watches, and between the 3 of them, you might wear them all twice a year. And now you're considering if you should be wearing these in casual scenarios. You feel a little too dressed up and a little too old manish. And really, at the end of the day, when you're buying a watch, make sure that you're actually buying one for a use case that you have and you actually need to fill. Another reason people fall out of love with their watches is because they bought the watch for the person they aren't, right? There's a sense of misalignment there, right? They're either buying for the person they wish they were, or maybe buying for the person they used to be. I had this happen to me. I used to be in the software engineering world and be more on the software engineering side before moving to product and then leadership. And for me, I was still mentally in that engineering space. So I thought I'd like much more toolish watches like Speedies and Zins and things like that. And I really found myself not loving these watches as I would continue to wear them out of a sense of like duty almost. This isn't so bad though. I think this is a very useful mechanism for actually figuring out who you are and what you like and what your taste preferences are, because how you dress and how you act and who you are, these things are all aligned. Another really easy one to mess up is buying a watch that overlaps with the rest of your collection, right? One where maybe another watch steps on its actual role. And you find this a lot for people who are into like divers. They tend to buy 5 black divers and they end up wearing one of them over and over again because they're all serving the same core use case. And I strongly believe that you should have these kind of core identity scenarios that are really synthetic and maybe aren't common, that help you select these watches and say, hey, do I actually have a good watch for salsa night? Do I actually have a good watch for going to Disneyland with the family? Do I actually have a good watch for an interview? And what you're looking for is you're looking for areas that aren't properly filled by watches that you have. So that's how you can buy a watch and make sure that you're not having to try and pull double duty for the actual same area of the collection, because that will be an area where you have one watch guaranteed to step on the other, and then one of them has to go. Another really big one is buying for status. You bought a watch because you wanted to flex, because you wanted people to think that you're doing pretty well in life. And that is a bad feeling to depend upon in order to be able to like your watches. And it's really important that you don't make that the sole reason you buy a watch. It's actually a valid reason to buy a watch. And look, we're human and we have these types of feelings and whatnot, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, if you have your watch that you stretch your budget for and you meet people who you feel in your area of life are doing better and they have a nicer watch in it, now you are going to feel like your watch is the settler, like your watch is the subpar one. So don't buy watches based off of status. It's just not a good way to go. You'll always end up finding a bigger fish. Number 9 is that you bought your watch because you loved it, but you end up finding another watch that gives you more enjoyment per dollar. And what that really comes down to is make sure you know your entire wish list before you end up buying a watch, because you can always buy that really cool watch from 1898 that was a pocket watch that was converted into a wristwatch. These things are awesome. But for $4,000, you might end up finding that there's a watch that you'd like way more. And making that decision once you have the watch, once you have the old Waltham or whatever, it is now too late. And you're gonna have to sell, and then you're gonna miss that watch, and there's all kinds of problems there. So make a whole wish list and then actually consider the pricing point of the wish list. Rather than a punch list that you're gonna go through over time and you're just merely ordering them, actually say, if I had to choose one of these going, which one would not stay in the wish list, and then pick the one that stays and buy that one. Number 10 is that you were bored and you wanted a new watch and you wanted that new watch feeling. There are not a lot of things that you're going to doom scroll quite as much as this stuff if you're into watch collecting, and it's nice to have something happen and have something to look forward to and enjoy and be excited about. And there's that hoarding mentality that we run into. So you will find yourself buying watches that you didn't think that you wanted a month ago, but suddenly now you absolutely need. So that comes back to some of the previous advice of make sure that you are waiting a while to buy your watch. Make sure that these things are stable, space things out. And if you get that feeling of opening up the fridge to look for something to eat, but on the watch side of things, try and recognize that. Try and nip it in the bud because it's a bad habit to make. Not just will it waste your money, but it will also get you collecting watches that you don't even necessarily like too much. There it is. 10 reasons you end up buying a watch and then falling out of love with it. What I'd like you to do is use this as a checklist. Use these 10 things and keep coming back to it and referring to it and making sure that whenever you're thinking about making a watch purchase, that you're not falling into any of these 10 traps. If you do that, you will end up loving and keeping whatever you buy, maybe passing it down to your kids one day. That would be awesome. What I want to hear from you is, have you ever bought a watch that you ended up falling out of love with? Which one? What reason in this list or not in this list did you end up falling out of love for the watch? Leave a comment down below and please like and subscribe, and I will make more of this content. Adios.